Hello everyone, good afternoon. I hope you are all enjoying this session so far. Welcome to the day 3 of this fantastic event where you can learn all about the latest products and features right from the product managers and experts. Today we have sessions on modern developer tools and also Tableau. Before we start the session, let me also remind you that you can ask all of your questions through your Q&A panel, and you can also directly interact with the product managers right by clicking this button to ask me to share your screen and audio. That's when I can share your screen and you can directly ask your questions. So please do not hesitate. If you have any questions, you can ask the questions in the Q&A pane, and towards the end, in the last 15 minutes, you can also ask your questions directly. You can be an excellent developer if you understand the right tools that you can use to build your applications, right? Not only that, if you know the development process patterns related to the application lifecycle management, you can efficiently manage your release process. We can learn all of that today from Karen Fidelek, Claire Bianchi, Rohit Mehta, and Dilip Burki. All of them are senior directors, product management. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome Karen, Claire, Rohit, and Dilip to show us how to simplify development with modern developer tools and services. Welcome all.
Right. All right, welcome everyone. My name is Karen Fidelek. We're here today. I'm here with my colleagues from our Developer Services Product Management team. We're here today to talk to you about development with modern tools and services. So we're really excited to be here. So before we get started, I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here, for taking time out of your busy days. I know everybody's really busy. So we really appreciate you being here and hope that we can provide some good value for you. Also to say, in these crazy times that we're living in right now, we hope that both you and your families and friends are safe and healthy wherever you are. So before I get started with the meat of this presentation, I do want to talk about our forward-looking statement, which you've probably seen before from Salesforce. We will be talking about some forward-looking product. So I need to remind you to please make your purchasing decisions based on currently available product. And with that, we can get started. So our agenda today, I'm going to start and kick it off with kind of an overview of our overall ALM process. I'm going to then talk about our org-based development model and introduce a new product that we're working on called DevOps Center. Dilip's then going to talk about our package-based ALM model. Claire's going to talk about our developer tooling offerings. And then Rohit's going to wrap it up with discussions about environments. And then we'll leave some time at the end for some Q&A. So with that, let me talk about application lifecycle management, or ALM. That's really what we're here to talk about today. And this is the overarching process that it takes to take an idea and take it all the way through to a released application. And what we're going to do is start with kind of an overview of what this process looks like. What we're looking at here is what we call our ALM wheel. This is just an industry standard 5-stage process where we go through an entire lifecycle process as we go through application development. This process starts with a planning stage, goes through coding where you're going to be actually making the changes in your application, bringing together changes from different developers, testing those in one or more environments, and then releasing them into production. And ideally, this is all backed by a centralized and externalized source control system. And again, this process is not unique to Salesforce, but what we are trying to do here is bring this industry standard process to Salesforce application development. So anybody who's developing on our platform can take advantage of these good practices when it comes to application development and lifecycle management. So with that, we look at this wheel, and what we're trying to do is deliver tools and capabilities and products that support that allow you to develop and release and manage change on the Salesforce platform using good tools and processes that we can provide you with. And so what you see around this wheel here, these gray circles, are all the capabilities and tools and products that we've been working on delivering as part of our overall developer experience. You may have heard us refer to Salesforce DX. That is really the initiative, the suite of products that delivers this good, robust, modern developer experience that allows you to have a solid and robust application lifecycle management process. And so throughout this presentation, we're going to be talking about different parts of this wheel and different products and offerings that we have. But I'm really going to start with kind of the overall framework for doing lifecycle management on our platform. And so with that, when we talk about development on our platform, one of the first kind of ways that we break things down is to these two different development models. We talk about an org-based development model or an unpackaged development model and a package-based development model. And the way we kind of like to first sort of distinguish these two from each other is in what the use case is that you're using as you're developing on the Salesforce platform. So the more like traditional Salesforce development where you're customizing core applications, maybe the core CRM applications, sales and service, you're making changes, you're moving arbitrary sets of changes through a lifecycle pipeline. That's what we would consider org-based development. And with that development model, we can support a lifecycle management process through both a declarative or UI-based interface, as well as a programmatic interface through our CLI. And then we contrast that with our package-based development model. And this is really a more modular, package-oriented development model where you're going to have these separate modules of applications that you're building. This is well suited for custom application development where you're building applications from the ground up in their entirety. And Dilip's going to be talking more about this model and package development. And with package development today, we support a programmatic or CLI-based interface only. So that's kind of the sort of high-level view of how we distinguish these two models. And what I'm going to be focusing on here in this first part is to talk about the org or unpackage-based development model. So we'll start off by looking at what this model looks like from a declarative or kind of UI-based standpoint. So if we look at this lifecycle process, and again, if you can see across the top here, these 5 steps, the plan, code, merge and test, and release, those are those same steps that we saw on that ALM wheel at the beginning. So that's really what the overall end-to-end process looks like. And then there's a series of steps or tasks that you're going to take to go from that idea that you have through the entire lifecycle through to release to production. The overall architecture that we're going to have here should look pretty familiar to people who are doing development on the Salesforce platform. It's a series of orgs or environments, one where you're doing development. That's where you're making the changes. Then you have one or more test environments. And here what we're showing is an integration stage and a staging stage. All of these are orgs that are sandboxes. And these are where the changes are moving through from left to right before they get into production. And the mechanics of how these changes are moved through the pipeline today in our declarative org-based development model is with change sets. And you can see these are the triangles that are being represented to show how those changes, those sets of changes are being moved from environment to environment. And those changes are collected into a change set, reviewed, deployed and uploaded and deployed into an integration stage where they can be tested before change set is created again to move into staging and then likewise into production. And so this is a pretty straightforward process, but it also has some deficiencies. And we'll be talking about those in just a minute here. And we'll be talking about some of the ways that we're looking to improve this process moving forward. Now, if we contrast that with a programmatic org-based development process, you can see there's kind of a lot more going on here, but it's not overly complicated, but there's just kind of some more stuff going on here. Same process, same end-to-end process where we're starting with that notion of an idea or a requirement. We're going through a series of environments, stages, development, testing through to production. But one of the key differences is how those changes are mechanically moving down that pipeline. Like how are they moving from environment to environment? In this model, we also we have this foundation of a source control system, which you see on the bottom here. And ideally, we have a source control repository that's being used with multiple branches. Those branches correspond to maybe the features as they're being developed, also correspond to the different stages. You can see an integration branch, a staging branch here that correspond to those stages in our pipeline. And the changes, the metadata changes, are moving in and out of these environments, out of the org into the source control repository, and then moving along that repository via branches in that repository, and then moving back into the downstream test stages. And that the way that they're moving back and forth is through commands in our CLI. So you can see examples of those commands here. Now, this entire process can be automated because we're using CLI commands. That's one of the nice benefits of it. We also have the ability here to identify automatically the changes that have been made in development. You can see we're using the source pull command to pull those changes out of the development sandbox. So these are some of the key kind of benefits that we see with a model like this. Source control being a grounding principle, getting those changes into an externalized and manageable source control system, being able to track those changes automatically using that source tracking capability that you see shown here as that source pull command, the ability to automate this process, and also the ability to have a more managed review process using a pull request from the source control system as an example here. And so this highlights some of the kind of key differences between this and what we saw in the previous slide. And these are some of the key benefits that really illustrate a modern ALM process. And these are some of the things that we want to bring to all of our developers, including developers who are using more of a declarative development model today. So as we contrast this again with that model that we saw in the previous slide with change sets, where we didn't see source control, we didn't have automatic change tracking, we have no way to automate that. We don't have really great review process. We want to bring all of that goodness to a declarative model. And not only that, but we want to allow those declarative users to work collaboratively with developers who are using a model like what you're seeing here today. And so what we're doing to support that is we're working on a product that we're calling DevOps Center, which I'll introduce in just a second here. But that is really to bring together all of our developers with programmatic and declarative and everything in between into a model where they can work together and take advantage of all of this modern goodness that we have available as part of modern software development. So if we take a look at what this product looks like, again, it's called DevOps Center. We are currently in pilot with this product. We're working on a beta early next year, and then we're planning to GA later next year. The whole goal with this is, again, to bring modern change and release management to our entire developer community. Some of the key features and capabilities, as I mentioned, the ability to track changes automatically through a modern UI, much better than what we have with change sets today. Be able to see the changes as they're being made, select the ones that you're interested in moving forward in the process, and then seamlessly integrate those changes with a connected version control or source control system. So we have an integration with GitHub where we're able to pull those changes out of the development orgs, move them into a source control repository. We completely manage the orchestration of the branches, the merging of those branches, the creation of pull requests for review. All of that is handled completely behind the scenes. So it's a really nice seamless integration to allow users to take advantage of source control, even if they're not familiar with really how it works. And then finally, the key premise of a good release management process is moving changes through a release pipeline. And when I say release pipeline, I mean basically you want to start in a development environment. You want to have one or more test stages where you're doing different flavors of testing throughout that life cycle, and then ultimately a production environment where your application is live. And so we will be, we have within this DevOps Center a configurable pipeline interface where you can create that pipeline with whatever stages you want and have a click-based interface to move the changes through that pipeline very, very easily, and therefore very confidently you can release your changes to throughout your pipeline and into production. So that's a quick overview of the product. Just a really quick kind of big picture overview of our vision here with this overall DevOps initiative. Again, bringing modern release management to everyone. It's providing an improved declarative experience for change and release management. Said another way, this is to provide a better alternative than what we have to change with change sets today. Secondly, providing a team collaboration, compatible interface for those hybrid or fusion teams, declarative, programmatic, everything in the middle, as well as different functions on the team that may play a role in the overall process, developers, release managers, testers, business stakeholders. Bringing democratization of DevOps, so bringing best practices like source control, testing, automation, continuous integration and delivery to everyone in an easy and an accessible way. And ultimately be providing extensibility to our entire platform, not just Salesforce Lightning development, but Heroku, MuleSoft Commerce, all these other platforms that we have at Salesforce. We want this to be the common unified release management experience for all Salesforce development. So that's the big picture there. To provide you with more information, I really encourage you to go visit our Trailblazer community group that we have specific to this DevOps Center product. This is where you can get more information on the product, including announcements. And there are video links on here of the product being demoed. So if you're actually interested in seeing it live and in action, you can go see those demos on this Trailblazer community group. So with that, I will hand it over to Dilip to talk about package-based ALM.
Hey, Karen, thanks a lot. Hello, everyone. Can you see my screen?
We can.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Hello, everyone. I hope it's morning for you back there, and really excited to talk to you about package-based ALM. As Karen said, she covered a lot of aspects around org-based development and all the exciting stuff that's happening in DevOps Center. Over the next 6 to 8 minutes, I want to talk to you about package-based ALM, how you can do application lifecycle management using packages. I suddenly had a quiet thing. Can you hear me still? Karen?
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
We can hear
Okay,
you.
sorry. I suddenly had a quiet pause. Okay, maybe everyone muted. Okay, sorry about that. And then I'll hand it over to Rohit and Claire, who will talk about environments and dev tools. As many of you may know, when we talk about package-based ALM, we have two types of packages: unlocked packages and managed packages. And when we use the term packages, they are somewhat analogous to the NPM packages and Java packages that you may be familiar if you're coming from a different stack. You also may know that for the last 15 or 18 years, we have had managed packages as the container for distributing business apps that Salesforce partners have used. But when we launched Salesforce DX, we launched a new package type called unlocked packages that was primarily geared towards customers and system integrators. This has more flexibility for customer use cases, and it is developed primarily keeping that in mind. For the rest of the session, I'll be talking primarily about an unlocked package-based development. If you want to talk about, if you're interested in managed packages, there are other videos we have produced related to that. So before I talk about unlocked packages, I think it's helpful as we marshal all these things together. Like what you'll hear during this entire session is how you use environments, how you use an ALM process, and how you use tooling to do DevOps. And one way that you can do with package-based model is laid out here. You will primarily use scratch arcs, which Rohit will be talking more about as you're doing development. And the whole goal with the package-based development model is you will build packages using a completely automatable set of commands. So the whole thought process here is, even though we break this down in our demos, we show you how you can use CLI to run a particular command. The expectation is once you've perfected this, there'll be a script that you will be writing for different types of operations that you're doing. So as you develop, build, test, and release your packages, you will leverage the different environments offered in the form of scratch arcs and sandbox arcs to promote changes and to manage changes. But at this point, you might still be wondering, yes, I've seen all these things, but why should I invest effort in unlocked packages? If you look at unlocked packages, some of the main benefits of it is source-driven development. The source of truth of the metadata or the app that you're building is in your version control system. Packages have a clear notion of versions. So as you keep building your app, you can take periodic snapshots of your package that we call package versions. And these versions become immutable artifacts that you can install in different environments. The fundamental notion of packages is you build it once and you can install it in any Salesforce org. We have made it incredibly easy for you to make changes to your packages. And we want the package version to serve as the unit of deployment for your continuous integration, continuous script things. We understand that packages have to be modular. So there is a very declarative way for expressing dependencies that can make modularization of your functionality very easy. And all of this paves way for you to organize your metadata in your production org. In terms of adopting package-based ALM, we don't recommend that you jump into package-based ALM on day one. The general philosophy here is start with a simple approach. Start adopting the Salesforce CLI, the dev tools that we offer, including VS Code, and slowly start externalizing your metadata and choose a version control system of your choice. And then start doing unpackaged deployments. Start figuring out how you can use CLI to start deploying units of metadata, and slowly start adopting scratch orgs and unlocked packages. And even here, we recommend that you take one particular project, do like a proof of concept, go through all these things, learn the skills, and then start embracing it. And one thing that I want to highlight in this slide is the beauty of package-based ALM is you don't have to do an all or none approach. You can slowly and gradually adopt these capabilities. In terms of managing dependencies, this question comes up many times. Our general recommendation, and we go deep into another video that I'm going to reference at the end of this session. We recommend that you don't have too many packages or too few monoliths. I think once you have more than 300 or 400 components, it's time for you to start thinking that the package has grown too large. There are multiple techniques that Salesforce platform offers to avoid circular dependencies as you start building these packages. Based on feedback that we have received from you all, we have made it incredibly easy for you to move metadata from one package to another. So if you get it wrong the first time, it's okay. You can use the capabilities that we offer to move stuff. And all of this is documented. There's a wealth of documentation for both Salesforce DX and unlocked packages. There is a phenomenal Trailblazer community called Unlocked Packages that I highly recommend that you join, where you can hear from other Trailblazers in terms of how they're using packaging. Org-dependent unlocked packages is a new package type that we introduced that's making it incredibly easy in scenarios where the metadata of your package depends on metadata that is not packaged and is in a particular production org. If you see me rushing through these slides, I want to make sure I give enough time for Claire and Rohit to go through their sessions as well. In terms of recently launched features, I highly emphasize push-up grids API. This is the capability by which you can use API to upgrade all the unlocked packages that are installed in different orgs. The other thing that I want to call out is scratch org shape. You can use the shape feature that Rohit will be talking about in your unlocked packages flow. In terms of what we have on the roadmap, we want to continue to invest and enhance unlocked packages. We want to offer support for snapshots when that goes GA, and we want to provide better control mechanisms as you start doing package installs. If you haven't seen this session, I highly recommend seeing this video. This is a Trailhead live session that I did with Accenture. They are also Australia-based, and the way they're adopted unlocked packages is truly commendable. And as you're getting started, if you want to know more about how you can use a package-based ALM, I highly recommend this session. I know I've spent only 6 or 8 minutes talking to you, but here we spend more than 45 minutes going into real depths of how you can use package-based ALM. With this, I will hand it over to Rohit. Sorry, I'm handing it over to Claire.
Not a problem. Wonderful.
Well, thank you, Dilip. My name is Claire Bianchi. I run the developer tooling PM team. We'll just jump right in. We build the tools that you use every day to get your work done. We own the VS Code extension pack, Salesforce CLI, and the soon to be introduced web-based IDE Salesforce Experience Code Builder. And what we focus on is bringing you the modern standards that you would expect as a developer to the Salesforce platform. And a lot of what Karen and Dilip have talked about is very core, Salesforce development standard. We're saying, hey, let's bring you IntelliSense. Let's make sure you can use automated testing. Let's make sure you can move your metadata out of your org and into a version control system. So what makes up developer tools? So first of all, our VS Code extension pack is for Salesforce development. It includes extensions for Apex debugging, LWC testing, and it's all backed by powerful language servers for like web components, Apex, Sockle, and more. And on top of that, we also include industry standard extensions in the Salesforce extension pack that enable you to build better quality code and more reliable code. And those include ESLint, PMD, Jest for UI testing, as well as Prettier for code formatting. And we find that using industry standards is the best possible way for you to, to develop so that you can follow the standards of everyone. Oh, sorry, why did you do that thing? And now I'm everywhere. Sorry, my computer has decided to do a really annoying thing. Can you see my screen? Yes, you can. Perfect. Next up, Code Builder. So as I mentioned before, we want to bring that same experience that you have on the desktop to the web. Salesforce is a no software company, but right now, if you want to do complex development, you need to download VS Code and install our extension pack. And we want to make that same rich development experience available in the web. So what is Code Builder? Code Builder will be powered by AWS. It's a virtual machine that's hosted in the browser that you will launch from your org, but it will have the exact same VS Code Salesforce experience as you're used to on desktop. So no need to learn a net new tool. You will have what you have on desktop today. And we know a lot of you are sitting on teams where some of you use desktop tools, some of you use web-based tools, and we want to be able to bring you those things together. Code Builder will be going beta in the spring, and there's a great set of demos from Dreamforce on Salesforce Plus that I highly recommend you go check out. Finally, is the Salesforce CLI. So as Karen said, change sets is the way today, and DevOps Center is the way tomorrow that you will declaratively move your changes. The CLI is how you do it programmatically. It enables you to be using a version control system. We highly recommend that you're automating your testing and you're scripting your deployments, and the CLI is what lets you do that. It's a scriptable and powerful interface, but it also lets you scaffold Apex and LWC locally. And it's a very powerful tool that enables packaging, but also org-based development. So what have we been doing? First of all, I want to talk about CLI unification. And if you tuned into Dreamverse, hopefully you heard a little bit about this. So the Salesforce ecosystem is expanding. It's ever expanding. Now with Slack, we have MuleSoft, Tableau, Industries Cloud, and so on and so forth. And we, as a platform, are trying more and more to enable you as developers to bring all that goodness to the platform applications that you're building. Except all of those different brands and companies that we just talked about have different developer experiences. And we know as a developer, that's really frustrating. It means that you have to manage different tools. You have to learn new things every time you want to add something to your application. And that is frustrating. And we want to keep you from having to do that. CLI unification is our first step to do that. So we want one Salesforce CLI for all of these things. On top of that, we took a step back and we thought about what is a great CLI experience? How do we improve the usability all up of CLIs? And so we thought about how do you have less clicks to get to what you want? So we've replaced colons with spaces. We've thought about the hierarchy of commands. What are you trying to do? We've also introduced some of these more interactive commands. So you can just write SF login, and then it's going to ask you, hey, what do you want to log into? Your org, your functions environment, great. Is that org your dev hub? Let's set it up as your dev hub. For those of you who are big scripters, no problem. All of these commands include flags. They also include JSON output by default. So that means that for your automated scripts, you will be set as well. But we've sort of tried to think about what is that CLI experience? How can we make it better? Today, you can use SF, which is the unified Salesforce CLI experience. You can use it because it comes bundled with SFDX. So it's all one Salesforce CLI, and they come bundled together. Today, SF supports functions and a set of current features that are also available in SFDX. And we're starting with everything that exists in SFDX today and bringing that into the unified world. Then we're going to move to Elastic Compute, Heroku, and MuleSoft, and so on. Next, I want to talk about the SQL Query Builder. If you haven't tried out this new extension in our extension pack, please do. It is a clicks-based query builder that allows, because you're connected via VS Code or in the future Code Builder to your org, you have access to all of your custom objects and field names, so you can easily search what you need. You can, it's set up to create basic queries with if and or and statements and sort by. You can actually preview and see the output. But at the same time, it's also very powerful if you want to start building a complex query, because under the hood, what the SQL Query Builder does is it creates a .SQL file. So you can start by building out your basic query with, okay, here are the custom objects and the fields that I want to include in this query. Here's my general statement. Then flip over to the .SQL file and do a complex join. And you can still go back to the query builder and preview your output as well. And so it's a very powerful tool. Highly recommend you check it out. Finally, I want to briefly talk about conflict detection. So although we don't want you to, we know you're sharing orgs for development. Let's talk sandboxes. So conflict detection, when I think about Salesforce development, I think about how you really have two environments in which you are creating code. One is your IDE, which you do programmatically, and one is your org, which you are doing via clicks. And you need to keep these things in sync, and sometimes that's hard. And if you're not using a scratch org and source tracking, conflict detection is here to help you. And so when you go to do a deploy, you are going to get a warning that if you are going to overwrite a file that is different in your org, and you'll be able to see side-by-side diffs. So every time you do a deploy, you'll be able to see a list of all the things that you would overwrite and side-by-side diffs of each of those files. And I think it's a super powerful tool, especially for those of you who are working in the same environment, or if you've just been going back and forth and that sandbox got refreshed and you're not really sure where it's at. It's a great way to see what is different about your local project and your environment. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Rohit.
Thanks, Claire. Let me just get this going. Wow, isn't this harder than it looks? Okay, I finally see my screen there. Okay, I believe you can see all my screen. Hi, everyone. My name is Rohit Mehta. I'm the product manager for the environments at Salesforce, and I'll be talking to you about two environments, Sandbox and Scratch Org. Please excuse me if I go a little bit fast. I'm going to try to keep this within our time frame. So Dilip spoke a little bit about package-based development, and he showed this screen earlier. This shows you the sort of the typical stages of your development cycle. You have the develop stage, you have a build stage where you're integrating changes from different developers, you have testing, you're trying to get some data, and you're trying to test all your changes in the context of some real-world data. And then you're finally doing some of the release activities that you normally do when trying to deal with a new feature release or a bug fix, right? You're trying to get this out in front of your stakeholders, do some user acceptance testing, some training, and then deploy to production. Now, the big difference with package-based development compared to what you may have done in the past is packages are built in this new environment that we have created called Scratch Orgs. So Scratch Orgs are these source-driven, CLI accessible, disposable environments that are used for developing changes for your package. So the goal here is that in the develop stage and in the build stage, each of the developers spin up a scratch org for themselves, deploy code from their version control system, build those changes, and then sync those changes back into the version control system. Scratch orgs are empty when they're first spun up. These are truly meant to be disposable environments where you do development and then you kind of get rid of that environment. As you build these changes, as these changes are integrated with other developers and you've tested them out, run some unit tests and F-tests, when it's time to then release these changes, that's when you're building packages, the same kind of unlock and manage packages that Dilip was referring to earlier. For the sake of testing these packages, you would be then deploying them into a sandbox. These can be developer pro sandboxes where you're getting in, you're seeding data from your own sources, or it could be a partial or a full sandbox which copy data from the production org. So backing all of this again is that version control system, and you're moving all of these changes to and fro these orgs via version control system and via the package that you build. So I spoke about scratch orgs. These are source-driven, CLI accessible, disposable environment. So much so that we delete them on your behalf after 30 days if you forget to delete them. And so it's important that you sync all of your changes on a regular basis so that there's no unsaved changes within these scratch orgs. These are truly meant to be sort of an environment where you're building and testing changes, experimenting with new features, and then ultimately building and packaging your metadata for your production org. One of the features, actually there are two features that we have been working on to make it easier for you to work with scratch orgs. The first one is called Scratch Org Shape. Now this feature helps you easily customize these scratch org environments in support of your metadata needs. So different production orgs have different features enabled, different licenses enabled in them, and you have different amounts of metadata in the production org that you have deployed today. What org shape allows you to do is lets you create a scratch org that resembles all the limits and features that are in your production org without the metadata. So scratch orgs are meant to be source-driven. They are empty at the time of creation, as I mentioned. But this feature helps you at least define the shape of a scratch org, where shape is the features, the licenses, the limits that you typically have in your production org, so that when you go to deploy that source-based metadata, that deployment will succeed and you will be able to build packages. And so it makes it very easy to then define a scratch org. You can define a scratch org based on the JSON configuration file, or you can use this feature to very easily resemble a production org. The second feature is something called Scratch Org Snapshots. Now, once you have a scratch org set up and you have figured out the shape of it, perhaps you used the scratch org shape feature, or you configured it using the JSON file, you've deployed your, you've identified all the different package dependencies that you need in order to build a package. You want to then try to replicate this process. You want to make this quicker. You want to make it easier for your developers. You don't want to have to spend tens of minutes just setting up your environment. This is where you would use the Scratch Org Snapshot feature. The Snapshot feature lets you set up a base scratch org with all of your package dependencies. Perhaps this is some piece of metadata or sample data, or it can be another package that you're extending. You can create a snapshot or an image of that scratch org with all of these dependencies, and then create multiple scratch orgs using that image. And so that's how it makes it easier for you and quicker for you to create these scratch orgs. It helps you develop with agility. And lastly, it helps you supercharge your CI, because now your CI can use that same snapshot to create additional scratch orgs and do so quickly so that your automated tests run much faster. Both this org shape and snapshots feature are currently in pilot. We are aiming to deliver the shape feature in GA in the summer 22 release and the snapshot feature in the winter 23 release. Finally, this may be an image that may be a bit more familiar to you. This is what we call the org-based development, and it's the second style of development after package development. In this development, you're using sandboxes in the different phases of your development. So instead of Scratch orgs, now you would be using developer sandboxes for building and integrating changes. You would be using a developer pro, and then lastly, partial and full for testing, and then for your pre-release activities. Again, very similar concept. You would be either using change sets, so as you do today, or you'd be using the DevOps Center that's coming up in the future. But the goal would be to then move changes to and fro these environments using some version control system. DevOps Center will make it much easier for you to move these changes, so you don't have to keep track of them individually. Now, a few features that are coming that will make life with developing in sandboxes much easier. One is source tracking capability. This is a feature that it has been delivered in GA recently, and it lets you automate the process of keeping track of changes in your sandboxes. So as a developer, very often, developers switch back and forth between the org UI and the IDE. They may make an object in the org UI, then come back to the IDE, write some Apex code to use that object or a field, and then go back into the org UI to make some additional changes directly in the sandbox. And keeping the org and your file system in sync is a pretty tedious approach. You don't know which files have changed, and you have to keep track of them pretty manually today. With the source tracking feature, the CLI does all of that for you. So it keeps track of what changes have been made in the org that are missing in the file system, and vice versa. What changes have been made in the file system that are missing in the org, and it allows you to very quickly sync those changes. So it's just a little enhancement that makes life with sandboxes much easier. Another feature that my team is working on is something called selective user activation. Now, as you know, when a sandbox is created, it copies over all the users from the production org. Now, most users in the production org don't need to access the sandbox. Most of your business users, they're only working in your production org, while your developers are the ones that are accessing your sandboxes. And so there's an additional cost of creating these sandboxes and of copying all these users from the production org, which slows down the sandbox creation. So with the selective user activation features, you can improve sandbox creation time. It lets you define which users should be activated in the sandbox, so we don't spend all the time activating every user in the sandbox. It gives you control over who can access the sandbox, so it improves the security because you can only provide access to your development team. And we are going to be providing options both in the UI as well as in the API to help with these changes, with the user management. So if you want to learn some more about all the features that we discussed today, there are a few different resources. We have a few Trailhead modules and trails that we've been keeping up to date, and we've been sort of updating with all the most recent features. There's one which helps you understand which application lifecycle management model is right for you, the org-based model or the package-based model. So it's a series of modules that will kind of guide you through that decision-making step. There's another one which will help you install all the developer tools and set up your workspace, the tools that Claire mentioned. And I highly recommend that one because regardless of which development model you're using, you can always use all of these toolings relatively easily. There's another one which helps you understand what's package development, and another one which helps you supercharge your development with continuous integration. And then finally, we have a bunch of Trailblazer community groups on the various topics. One for Salesforce DX, but then one also DevOps Center, as Karen mentioned, unlock packages that Dilip is managing. There's a CLI GitHub repo that Claire's team looks at, and as well as the VS Code Extensions repo, where you can engage with the PMs directly or with other developers that work in the teams and with other fellow community members who are kind of going through the same journey as you are. So if they hit a problem, they post there, and they may even provide a workaround that may be helpful for you. So with that, I hope I stuck to time. Maybe I went a minute over, but I want to say thank you. I don't know if we have time for Q&A, so
yeah, let's take a quick Q&A, Rohit. And yeah, we are on time. So most of the questions have been answered instantly. Thanks, Karen, Claire, and all for answering the questions. But Rohit, I have a few questions for you here. The first one is like, does Snapshot cover all features org shape provides?
Yeah, so a snapshot will help you replicate an entire Scratch org the way it was set up. So it'll include not just all the features, but it'll also include all the metadata. It'll include the dependent packages that you installed within the Scratch org and also data. So it's a full replica of a Scratch org.
Awesome. And we have one more question. Why does Scratch org last 30 days, not 60 or 90 days, or even let developers decide how long it can last, please?
Yeah.
So
So for when we first created these Scratch orgs, the feedback we got was that for most developers, a sprint was about 2 weeks or 14 days. But there were some teams where 30 days was the right duration. What we want to do with enforcing the 30-day rule is provide a way for you to think about syncing your changes to the version control system all the time, right? We want to have that be the best practice, that you are constantly thinking about putting those changes in the version control system than just leaving them in the org. Keeping those changes in the org for a long time, you tend to run the risk of those changes getting stale, and then you have other issues such as merge conflicts and so on. And so if you want to have long-lasting orgs, sandboxes are that environment for you today. But for Scratch orgs, 30 days is the right number. That said, we have tried to build the feature called Snapshots so that we can make it easier for you to rebuild those Scratch orgs. So if you have to recreate the Scratch org after 30 days, we are providing the feature to help you do so.
awesome. And there is one last question, Rohit. I think we have some limits on the number of Scratch orgs per edition. That's what was asked by Anish Babu. So we have the limits based on the type or the edition, right? Number of Scratch orgs that we can create.
So technically there's no limit on how many Scratch orgs you can have. We include a certain number of Scratch orgs in every edition as part of your base allocation. So if you have an enterprise edition org, we allocate a few Scratch orgs for you. And if it's an unlimited edition org, we allocate more Scratch orgs. Beyond that, if you want additional Scratch orgs, you can always reach out to your AE and purchase them. There is no limit on how many Scratch orgs you purchase.
Awesome. So that almost concludes our session. Thank you so much, Karen, Claire, Rohit, and Dilip. Today's session, I know it's a packed session and it covered almost all of the things related to developer experience and DevOps. That's one of the biggest asks from the community of ANZ region. And I hope this is really helpful to all of them. And thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all your plans and also the future roadmap and all. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Awesome. So the next session will be starting in the other sessions tab. If you can just transition from this session to the other session by clicking the sessions tab on the left side and selecting the next session. I request all the participants to move on to the next session, and next session is going to begin in next 2 to 3 minutes. I can see people moving. Thank you so much for moving to the other session.